Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a sci-fi historical fiction author, podcaster, and of course, audiobook producer, other than Mr. Henry Sullivan III.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Mr. Henry, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, I was born and grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm currently living in New York State. In between, I've lived in several U.S. States. I've lived in Illinois. I've lived in Texas. I've lived in Alabama, Arizona, California. So I've worked in many parts of the U.S. I've been writing seriously since 2010. I started publishing my books as audiobooks pretty early on when I started taking my writing seriously in 2010. And so that's one of the main things that I focus on. And for me, the difference right now is that I'm serializing my latest novel on Substack. And to do that, I'm recording each scene myself, which is different from the way I've done it before. Before, what I would do is I would write the whole thing, and then I would hand it off to voice actors, professional voice actors, and then they would read the novel, write notes, and then record the novel, and then it would go to post-production. So what I'm doing now is very, very different from what I've done before.
Well, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Henry. Thank you. So, today let's talk about your writing process of all your books. You've written multiple books. Have your core philosophy of what a book should be or do for a reader remain constant, or has it fundamentally evolved from your first book to your most recent?
No, I think it's remained pretty constant, actually. The main thing that I've learned over time is that different people sort of key in on different things, because another thing that I did from the beginning is I've joined dozens of writing groups. And what that exposed me to is the different ways that other writers have come to fiction. And so every writer has a type of fiction that they absolutely love, and oftentimes that's the type of fiction that they aspire to produce themselves. Um, and usually, whatever genre that they like, or if they do multi-genres like I do, they have a certain preferences in terms of what they're going to look for in fiction. And so that's the main thing I've learned, is that you're not going to please everybody, but if you understand what you're trying to do, then you will definitely find an audience.
Yes, you need to find your audience, people. And looking back, is there a single non negotiable ritual or condition that has been present in writing process for every single book you've written, regardless of genre or topic?
I read my work aloud when I'm writing. That's the one thing that is not negotiable. It really, really helps. I think, and other writers that I work with, that's the way they write as well. They as we're writing the process, we read it aloud to kind of hear it. And in fact, the writing groups that I've started myself, the difference between the way these writing groups operate is when we meet is usually once a week, and what we do is everyone who has submitted something, someone else in the group will read that work to the entire group. And when you hear someone else read your writing aloud to you, it almost tricks your brain into thinking that somebody else wrote it. It's the closest you'll get to that experience. And usually what you find out is the thing that you thought was on the page is not actually on the page. So you hear what's actually there as opposed to what you intended. And plus the other great thing, I mean, especially since now we do it virtually, we do it using, I use WebEx, but you can do it using Zoom. When a person's reading a book and a scene is so funny that they laugh out loud, even though they've committed to reading it aloud for you, that tells you that that joke really works. Or, I've actually had people react to different things in the scene, and so it's really helpful that process is really helpful as part of my workflow.
Well, interesting workflow, Mr. Henry. So, how do you delineate your writing process from thinking or researching process? Where does the book truly begin? The first note, the first outline, or the first sentence of a chapter one?
For me, it usually begins uh, with the theme. It usually begins with just the broad idea of exactly what I would like the person to, if they were describing the book to someone else, this is the first thing they'll say. So they'll say something to the point of, it was thought provoking, and that's because I kind of initially came up with an idea that had a lot of different elements to it, different societal issues, different political issues, some fascinating technology or something like that. And then the second thing that comes to that for me are the characters. And the characters usually come to me all completed. They're it's usually not the case that I change much about the character as I write the character. Usually I'll kind of envision a character, and all the different aspects of them are all there, almost like it's a person that I've actually met. And then the other thing that comes, and this may sound strange, but the thing that comes to me last is actually the story. And so, I know that it's important to actually craft a story where the person goes through an emotional arc that draws the reader in. But that's usually not the first thing that I think of.
Mr. Henry, tell us, you've likely encountered the common advice to find your process. Do you consciously architect yours, or did it merge organically through trial, error, or demands of different projects?
Well, like I said, I mean, I've been reading my work aloud from the beginning. Um, and also the things the elements that come to mind first, that's been the same every time. I guess the main thing, like currently, for instance, one big difference is, uh, even though I've been reading my work aloud, it's different when you record yourself because I'm using Audacity to edit the recording. I don't know if you're familiar with Audacity.
Hmm.
Um, and so there's a process, when I'm reading it aloud, I don't actually record it. I've been doing this for years. I don't actually record it. But to serialize my current novel on Substack, I actually have to read it aloud into the microphone, record it as I'm reading it, and then go back and do the post editing myself. And that kind of forces me to think a lot more about my word choice, my sentence structure, what I tell the reader in what order. All those things become a lot more salient when you do it that way. And even just hearing the recording yourself, because I'm used to hearing recordings that were made by professional actors. And so they usually make my writing sound a lot better because because they're performers and they know how to do that. Whereas I'm not trained as an actor, so I'm not performing the recording. I mean, once I'm done with this current novel, I'm going to hand it off to a cast of actors the way I've done in the past, and produce a product that actually has all of the different dimensions of it. Professionals have worked on every aspect of it. What I'm doing on Substack is I'm just reading it clearly and recording that. But hearing the recording is yet another experience, and it's affecting my workflow.
So on the architecture of ideas and organization, Mr. Henry, walk us through the lifespan of an idea. What does an idea look like when it first grabs you, and what is your specific system for capturing, nurturing, and testing to see it if it's the legs for a full book?
Well, I mean, I have this general impression that I would like to leave, questions that I would like the reader to to have in their head once they finish the novel. Um, and so I work through those questions since I've been working with writing groups of with groups of other writers and getting their feedback. Um, what that helps me do, like the big thing for me, is writing female characters. So it's I've come to accept that if all of the females in a group have the exact same reaction to something, it doesn't really matter whether it makes sense to me or not. They're right. So and so that's definitely one thing. I've made changes where it's just like I really don't see why this is such a big deal, but every single female in the group said pretty much the exact same thing. So I'm like, okay, so that must be important. So I'll just sort of you know work process their feedback and make the character more authentic to a female reader. Um, and so, I mean, it's an iterative process. It takes a while to actually get a draft to the final work.
To the final work for sure. So, are you a meticulous outliner or intuitive discoverer? Has your approach to plotting structure become more less rigid over the course of your books, and why?
That's a good question. Actually, I find it most helpful to force myself to write an outline after I've already started the book. And I want to emphasize I have to force myself to do it, so I don't want to make it seem as if I'm this organized writer. Um, but it's not as useful in the very beginning because you don't actually have a feel for the characters. You don't know how they're going to interact with each other. Um, and you don't have, like, as you're writing scenes, the scenes that come, like if you write the first 7 scenes, the next 10 or 20 scenes are going to have to basically deal with whatever you set up in those first 7 scenes. And so that's sort of, as you're getting to scene 7 or 8, you've already narrowed down where you're going with the book. You've already made a bunch of choices. And that's a good place to actually sit down and create a formal outline so that you're intentionally thinking about those things. And you actually have something that you're committed to. That's the other thing. So you go back to the outline and say, oh, that's right, I intended to do this. You remind yourself of the commitments you've made. So that's my process. I don't really think, for me, it's not valuable to write an outline first.
Hmm. Yes, definitely. And how do you organize the chaotic middle, the research, scenes, character notes, and the thematic threads? Do you use physical tools or digital ones, and has this system changed?
Oh, okay. Well, I use Scrivener, and I find that Scrivener can do a lot actually. I don't know if you've ever seen Scrivener, but
Mm.
I started using it because it's the best application that I've found for compiling your scenes into an ebook. I haven't found a better one, and it's not easy to do that with Word. It's very difficult. So, but Scrivener can, I mean, you can use it to write outlines. The really thing that's nice about Scrivener is in Word, you basically have one page and you can organize the page and you can create, footnotes and all that kind of stuff. But with Scrivener, you literally have individual text. And so sometimes I'll write a scene, I'll write a chapter where I'll have chapter 1, but then I'll have another text below that text that's the opening scene. So it's just the first 3 or 4 paragraphs. And then when the tone of the scene starts to pick up, the pace of the scene starts to pick up, that'll be on the next text, the next text file in the system. And so then it'll be like, character meets the mother. And then I'll just have, for that one text file, that'll be that entire part of the chapter. And then I can create another file where it's like character meets the father, or whatever. So that's one of the nice things about Scrivener. I've tried outlining with Excel and other things like that. And I know people who use other more complicated storyboarding applications, but I haven't really found any of those things to be much better than just Scrivener.
Interesting, Mr. Henry. Yes, so as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals? As well as podcast host.
Well, my short-term, if you include podcast hosts as well, my short-term goal is to build my audience. So that's definitely one thing I'm working on. Substack is remarkably good at that. I think because you're able to, when you post on Substack, you can set it up to post on a bunch of other platforms all at the same time. So it's a good hub to start from. My long-term goals is to create a body of work that all fits together. So when you can almost read like just a paragraph excerpt from one of my novels, and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like Henry Sullivan III. That sounds like something he wrote. That's my long-term goal.
Good luck to short-term and long-term goals. Good luck for your goals, Mr. Henry, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Don't give up. I know it's difficult because it's rare for someone to, do writing full time. Most people need to have a full-time job on the side. A full-time job as well. A lot of people have kids and other responsibilities. So it's just good to try and come up with a routine that allows you to stick with it, keep doing it on a regular basis. You may not be able to write every day. Not everybody can, especially depending upon your responsibilities, your job or whatever. But if you can come up with a routine where you're at least able to touch your work every other day, 3 times a week or something like that, that can be really helpful, because I know for most of the writers I know, writing is not really a choice, it's a need. And so you need to satisfy that need. And the more you do it, the better you get.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for that advice, Mr. Henry. And can you please recommend a book of books that influence your journey?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Munich by Robert Harris. I really enjoyed that book, as well as he also wrote a trilogy based on Cicero. To me, the best one was the third one, Dictator. Was just awesome. That's when you actually see Caesar. He has a very amusing interpretation of Caesar. But I also love a bunch of other writers like Octavia Butler. The novel that, I don't know if it was her debut novel, Bad Seed. But I always tell people, if you really want to force yourself to like pay a lot of attention to exposition, that story, the movement of that story was made through exposition, unlike a lot of other novels where the movement has to do with the emotional arc of the character and all that kind of stuff. She really does a good job of using exposition in Bad Seed. I guess, let's see, a third novel. I'm currently listening to Mary Stewart's the second novel in her Arthurian trilogy. The first one is The Crystal Cave,
Mm-hmm.
but that whole trilogy is really good as well.
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Henry. And what part of your process do you consider your secret weapon? The thing that, while maybe unglamorous, reliably moves the projects forward when nothing else will.
Wow. I don't know. I guess just listening. I mean, making sure that I'm in touch with some form of fiction. Like I said, I mean, I guess maybe I'm just a very um, sound oriented person. So even if I just listen to a couple of minutes of a really well done audiobook, it just keeps me going because it reminds me of what I'm aspiring toward. So that's I guess the example I would give.
Yes, and thank you for that empowering answer, Mr. Henry. If you could go back and give your pre-first book self one piece of a process advice, what would it be? What took you the longest learn through experience?
Oh, exposition is definitely the thing that takes the longest. At least it took me the longest. Contextualizing what's actually going on in the scene. Um, because I've met a lot of writers, especially guys who are into action, and they try to open a novel with an action scene. And the problem with that, I mean, it's not like it's impossible, but the problem is that you don't really know any of the characters, so you don't know who to care for, um, and you also don't know the context. But I guess for people who are really really into action, they're not really looking for a lot of context. They just basically want a Bruce Lee Bruce Lee movie. But context to me takes the longest, even though when you finally come up with that sentence that establishes the context, that wraps everything up, that wraps up a couple of paragraphs, what you've been building, it always feels like, why didn't I come up with that first? But it's just the hardest thing to think of that summary, especially an efficient way to sort of present it. So that's what I would say.
Yes, and Mr. Henry, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season as well, comedy 101 in third season, and food 101 in sixth season also. Geography 101, Love Letters, Movie 101, Review Music 101, our fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, Law 101, Bible Verses 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and Motivation 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Henry, after all these books, do you believe writer's process is a fixed personal system, or is it something that must remain forever adaptable to unique demands of its new project?
Well, I just believe in general it's good to be, adaptable. Because you never know what's going to happen. And like I said, for a lot of people, writing is not so much a choice as a need. It's something that really, fulfills their lives and so on. And so, given that, it's just good to be flexible. You might change jobs. Like I said, I've traveled a lot for work, and I've had to adapt my routine to fit that as I go from state to state, situation to situation. So I definitely believe adaptable is the way to go.
Adaptability, indeed. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Henry. Thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your books, your podcast, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Well, like I said, I mean, I'm serializing my current novel, Emperor, is part of the series, The Council of Nobles. I'm doing that on Substack, but Substack pushes it out to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so you could find it on all those podcasts. The novel that had a professional cast, which was absolutely awesome. These are people who won awards for their voice acting. That's Coliseum. Coliseum is available pretty much anywhere where you listen to music and podcasts. So Spotify, Storytell, Libro FM, audiobooks.com, Hoopla, if you have a library card. In your community, you can rent Coliseum from Hoopla and Libby. It used to be called Overdrive. And also I have the other short fiction audiobooks that I have. That was the American Fathers. You see that up there, Emperor, Sheila and Jazeera, and included in that is also Escape from New Orleans.
Mr. Henry, one more question. What has been the single biggest point of a failure or frustration in your process across all your books? And what systematic adjustment did you make it to address it?
Marketing on Facebook. That's a really easy answer. Yeah, I mean, I've actually seen other posts from authors about this. Marketing your work is very, very difficult. And I think the reason is because the way that readers, not so much for audiobooks, but definitely for printed books, hardcover and paperback, people go to certain places looking for certain types of fiction. So if they read mysteries, they know where to get mysteries. If they read science fiction, they know where to get it. And so when you push out stuff through like Facebook posts and all that kind of stuff, you're shoving it in people's faces. That's not normally how people decide to read a book. So I find that what you need to do is you need to get people interested in your overall concept. That's what Substack helps you do. And then once they're there, they're like, oh, you have science fiction, or oh, you have action. They discover that you actually do have things that they're already interested in, and they might check it out.
So, Mr. Henry, how does your process intentionally differ from writing a fiction versus nonfiction? Is it a completely different mindset, or are there mechanics of sitting down to write the same?
Well, I would say one is enjoyable, that's fiction, and the other one is very frustrating for me. I've had people who write essays say, wow, how do you come up with these stories? And I'm thinking, how in the world could you, take the time out to write a 10,000 word essay, So it's, for me, writing essays, writing nonfiction, it's not like I can't do it. It's just I don't know what the motivation is, because like it's for me it's not an inspirational process for me. Whereas fiction is fun, So I guess for them the essays are at least intellectually satisfying, but I have a hard time understanding how do you choose one way of saying it from another way of saying it? Because basically you're just disseminating information. So, I could understand like maybe a poetry writer. It's like you really care about the order of the words. It really matters to you. There's an emotional connection there, but I just don't understand essays. I just don't understand nonfiction writers.
Well, people, let's support Mr. Henry Sullivan III, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to rise. So, Mr. Henry, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Monica, people, see you soon.